athletes.
But everybody's talking about it, right? Like this is the thing that is the staple of this transition to Kubiak after losing your offensive coordinator again.
CONTINUITY.
Okay, cool. I thought I was close. I think I threw an extra N in there. But you lose Stefanski to the Cleveland Browns. Now you're bringing a guy who's been in the system, whose principles have really governed this, outside zone run scheme that's made the Vikings one of the more potent offensive teams in the league. What they were able to do as a running team, open up so much for the play action passes downfield, where Kirk Cousins was very successful as anybody in the NFL. So you feel comfortable, Manny, having a dude like this in this position. Here's my take on why this matters. I don't think it matters as much for Kirk Cousins because clearly they've been good, with other coordinators. I expect them to still be one of the better offenses in the league. I don't know if it's as great for the offense. I mean, they get another guy they're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
The team itself gets a familiar face. What I'm saying is I think the Vikings will have a good offense, and I think they would have had a good offense even if there were another coordinator in there because they've got the personnel where you can't really be terrible, right? When you have Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph, Dalvin Cook.
Two of the best wide receivers in the NFL.
You can't be terrible. I mean, you can have rough times, and clearly in big games, they didn't put it all together the way that they should have. But you're not going to be terrible. It matters, in my opinion, for the franchise because this is what it means to elevate Gary Kubiak to the position of offensive coordinator. It makes it very easy to move on from Mike Zimmer. It makes it very easy if 2020 is a disaster of a season. If you get to week 8 and this team is 3-5 for some reason, it makes it very easy to say Gary Kubiak is our interim head coach, and now he has a chance to be the permanent head coach. If 2020 collectively is a disaster and you get to the playoffs and you're one and done and you're not competitive and it's clear that you're not a Super Bowl contender and you're many, many pieces away from that, it also makes it very easy to say, Mike Zimmer, it's been real. We're going to give Kubiak a chance rather than go on some exhaustive search for a new coach. So more than anything, this move for me, Manny, means, yes, continuity. I get it. But it also means that if this thing is a disaster in 2020, it's very easy to fire Mike Zimmer and move on to Gary Kubiak.
I think on the interim basis, for sure. My only question with Gary Kubiak is, does he want to be a long-term head coach again? And I'm not sure. I mean, I don't
what
know Gary Kubiak. Well, that's the question because he left the Denver Broncos a year removed from winning the Super Bowl with a broken down Peyton Manning and that great defensive performance by Wade Phillips and Von Miller and those guys. He left after that next season largely because of health reasons.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that is something that he wants to explore again, being a head coach. Because when you're an offensive advisor, when you're an offensive coordinator, you're only worrying about one specific portion of the football team. But when you're the head coach, and this has kind of been a criticism of Mike Zimmer because he's a defensive guy, and sometimes the thought or the question is, does he care enough or does he want to pay enough attention to the offense to really have more of a hands-on approach with it? And at least from the outside looking in, Mike Zimmer has never really struck me as that guy. I just wonder if, in the case of Gary Kubiak, if being a head coach beyond 2020, if you have to part ways with Mike Zimmer, is something that Gary Kubiak would want to do. I could see him wanting to do it on an interim basis.
Yeah.
Because if they start out 3-5, like you said, or 2-6 or something like that, and things are just falling off the rails and they've checked out on Mike Zimmer, and if Rick Spielman and the Wilfs want to pull the trigger on a change, Gary Kubiak is the logical interim. Yeah, it's the easy. Obviously, he's been a head coach. He's won a Super Bowl as a head coach. He's got the experience to be able to step in and at least not have things completely fall off the rails for the rest of that season. But I just wonder if beyond 2020, if that's something that Gary Kubiak would want to continue to do.
Well, that's why I think moving on to offensive coordinator means a lot, because I'm sure he could have told Mike Zimmer, listen, I like what I'm doing now. I like being an advisor. Right. I like being in the background. Taking on a role as offensive coordinator, to me, suggests he's certainly ready to take on a serious coaching role. I mean, offensive coordinators are getting hired in this league. I mean, Gary Kubiak, to me, is positioning himself to be a leader again in the NFL, because I don't think you become offensive coordinator knowing that you're Mike Zimmer's guy, knowing that you're going into a really what feels like a make or break season and not realize that you could be in that position. I think Gary Kubiak could have easily said, I like what I'm doing. It's not the same stress level. I'm kind of in the background. And guess what? I want to keep doing it if that's okay. I don't think Mike Zimmer would have said offensive coordinator or nothing else. So that's why I feel like health-wise, how he's feeling overall about being back in football, this feels to me like a move that you don't make simply because Mike Zimmer says, hey, we're looking for a coordinator. If you're Gary Kubiak, you've been in this game for a long, long time. You're making what might be a difficult decision, but it's something you're thinking of before you accept it, Mandy, which is why I feel like he knows, especially being a veteran, kind of how this thing could shake out.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows if there are struggles, and I'm talking about struggles where you look early on in the season and go, something's not right, this team isn't getting better. I don't think Mike Zimmer's guaranteed 16 games. I don't think in 2020 he's guaranteed 16 at all. I think if you go into next season and it's clear that this team is either taking a step back or it's showing some of the same weaknesses that put it in this wild card position in 2019, he's vulnerable. And that's where a Kubiak can come in, and that to me is your real continuity. If you need a new coach, whether it's on an interim basis or perhaps next summer you're looking for a new guy because Mike Zimmer doesn't have the job anymore, Kubiak is right there.
Yeah, he would certainly at least be an option, I think. Let me ask you this, though.
Yeah.
What is the ceiling of the 2020?
That's a great question. I'm trying to figure it out.
I'm struggling with this because obviously they have needs. There's a lot of really good football players on this team.
Yeah.
And they have two of the best wide receivers in the league. I think Brian O'Neill is a young up-and-coming offensive lineman. He had a really nice year at right tackle for them. I think he's a piece that could potentially be a long-term solution, whether it's staying at the right tackle spot or if they decide to transition over to the left side. It could be a difficult transition, but he at least seems like he has the talent to be able to do that.
Might have to.
Yeah, you might have to if you're not able to get one in the draft or in free agency. And if there are some pieces on defense that you look at and say, okay, this guy, I can see this guy here for the long haul. Danielle Hunter being one of those guys.
Definitely.
But what is the ceiling of the 2020 Minnesota Vikings? Because, Myron, there are a lot of flaws on this team. And there's so much talk about Kirk Cousins and should he get an extension or not, or, well, they just need to get this and that, and then Kirk will be fine. And I just don't see there being enough resources for enough improvement to get this team over the hump in 2020. I'm not sure if I can see, I don't know if there's going to be enough cap space, if and when they decide to part ways with certain guys that will give them a lot of cap relief. I'm not sure there's going to be enough cap space to fix all of the flaws and all the warts that are on this roster quick enough to get this team over the hump in 2020.
No, you are who you are right now as the Minnesota Vikings, which I think Mike Zimmer, that's why he's facing so much pressure. Nobody's coming through the curtain. They're not playing music, like this is the Royal Rumble or something like that, and there's going to be a 29th guy. You have who you have. Like, nobody's coming to save the day. And I think that's why there's pressure building on a Mike Zimmer. Their ceiling is, could they be as good as the Packers were this year and get one of those home field advantage, at least for a game? Sure. The Packers weren't that good. The Packers beat the Vikings. That's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at that San Francisco 49ers team, and I'm like, yeah, they're going to keep getting better, and they got a great coach, and they got a lot of young pieces. They might be here to stay for a long time. I look at the Seahawks, and I go, Russell Wilson did this with dudes they pulled off the street legitimately at running back in recent weeks.
Yeah. He's
going to get better. Guys are going to get healthier, although they probably lose Jadeveon Clowney. I look at the Saints and go, Minnesota went there and won. And Drew Brees, who is he going to be next year if he comes back?
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to regress? Because that's going to happen. And it happened to some degree this year as well. So that's a mystery as well. But I think they can be one of the better teams in the NFC. I just don't know that you get over the hump if the hump is the San Francisco 49ers and being sort of the king of the NFC. So that's where you have to start. What's a real expectation? Is it getting to the NFC Championship game and hoping things go well against a team like San Francisco that you improve upon what you did this year, which was nothing against
Mhm.
them. You could have stayed home. You could have called the Uber at halftime, right? You could have stayed in the locker room. But I also think the 49ers are that good, a 49ers team that could win the Super Bowl. So you have to start there, Manny. The bigger question to me is, what's the basement for this team? What's the floor? How
Yeah.
bad can this thing get? Because I will not forget 2018. And I will not forget that this is a team that is always going to be capable of playing 500 football.
Mhm.
Those plays they didn't make against Chase Daniel and the Bears, the plays they didn't make against Matt Moore and the Chiefs, the plays that they made against Dallas that you don't know if they're going to make that continuously, being down 20-0 to the Denver Broncos, those are all situations that the Vikings will always find themselves in, and they can go against them. So the basement to me is out of the playoffs. The ceiling feels like NFC Championship, potentially. And then who knows what happens there. And I still think that has to be the expectation because this is not a rebuilding team. Like, this is not a team that had to go out and find a bunch of pieces in order to put together a franchise that might contend. This team was already contending. So we can't talk about this like it's 2016. No, you were supposed to build on what happened in 2017. And now here we are going, great game against the Saints, although that felt like a one-off, like an anomaly. It didn't feel like you could do that, multiple times. And I think that's the issue, right, Manny? You go and you beat the Saints, great. But we haven't seen this team do that consistently. So that, to me, would be the hope going into next year. Can you play like that 2, 3, 4 games in a row and put yourself in a position where you're resting in the wild card round and you're getting the benefit that Green Bay got when they were at home that week and resting, and then they go play the Seahawks and win? Are you good enough to put yourself in that position? That should be the minimal expectation. Super Bowl, again, San Fran looks really good. There are going to be a lot of hurdles to get into the Super Bowl, but being there and being a game away, that has to be the expectation going into next year.
Well, and I think a lot of it, too, has to go into so much of this does depend on what you do in the regular season. And
that's where it all is.
Callers brought this up several times over the last couple of weeks since the Vikings were bounced out, is that the Vikings in 2019 sort of just made their bed. They kicked away a lot of games that they should have won. Kansas City on the road against Matt Moore. The 2 games against the Packers you kicked away because you didn't show up. Kirk Cousins had bad games in both of those games. And if you turn those 3 losses, just those 3 losses,
just that.
I mean, we didn't even talk about the debacle at Soldier Field in week 4.
Chase Daniel.
You take those 3 games and turn those into wins. The Vikings are 13-3.
Whole different story.
13-3. They got a first round bye, and I don't know how the tiebreakers would play out, but maybe the number 1 overall seed, and they're hosting the NFC Championship game, perhaps.
Yes.
And that's that, to your point, that has to be the goal for them. The question I have is, do they have the fortitude going into next season to not let the 2 games against Green Bay
I don't know.
happen again?
Yeah.
The game again, the loss you kicked away in Kansas City.
Yep, nobody knows.
Do they have the fortitude to do that? And I don't know. I mean, we can talk about they got to go get a guard, they got to draft a tackle, they got to go get corners and all that stuff. And that's the other part of this too, Myron, is they're in a situation salary cap wise, they're gonna have to let some guys go.
Yes,
some key pieces go, and Mike Zimmer's probably gonna have to do some magic defensively.
Yep.
I mean, because he's known as a great defensive mind, he's gonna have to probably do some patchwork on his defense. And I just wonder if going into next season, if they're going to have the fortitude to not kick away a lot of games and put themselves in position to have home field advantage, because that's going to increase their chances of getting to the Super Bowl. And B, are they going to be able to endure some of the key losses that are inevitable this offseason?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, because changes are coming. Change is going to come. That's what Sam Cooke said. It's a great song if you haven't heard it yet. Changes are coming, but it doesn't matter because you expect Mike Zimmer, if he is that defensive guru that a lot of people says he is, he'll find a way. You still keep a guy like Danielle Hunter. You're not losing him.
Right.
You got to find a situation in your secondary to shore that up because there were too many holes there. But I think this is a team that defensively under Zimmer, they've at least been respectable, and they've been excellent in some years. So you would expect them to not hover below that, even with some of the changes. It comes down to what you just said. It ain't the X's and O's and the analytics and all the other stuff that people obsess over. It's, can you win big games?
Mhm.
Can you win critical games? That's the bottom line. That 49ers team that's in the Super Bowl right now, that's a team that showed up in big moments.
Huge.
That's a team that even in their losses, you weren't just beating them. You were going to have to play both halves, 4 quarters to beat them. They were always ready, regardless of the situation. Can the Vikings be that kind of team? Can you be the team that goes on the road, beats Dallas when everybody thought Dallas was a solid team, and not be the team that comes back and you're down 20-0 to the Denver Broncos and whatever power forward they were playing at quarterback that week? Like, can you be that
Brandon
team?
Allen.
Because those are the things to me, Manny,
Yeah.
is the best teams in the league. The teams that get there are consistent. And that has to be the key word going into training camp, consistency. And I feel like if you start next year and you are 6-7 games into that season and we're seeing the same patterns and you've lost a couple games already that you should have won, tell me why you keep Mike Zimmer. I understand that Mike Zimmer has proven a lot, and I understand it's not easy to find a head coach. Hello, Freddie Kitchens, right? Hello, a number of guys in this league who everyone thought they were the solution, and then they weren't.
Hello,
But
Matt
Manny,
Patricia.
come on, Manny. For me, it feels like, and not to be confused, that's Manny Hill. I'm Myron Metcalf. Just in case you got it a little twisted, I understand. This is kind of a new thing. Don't worry, we'll help you through it. But Manny, I don't understand why he stays if there are early signs that we're going to see the same show. Why you don't just move on to a Kubiak if you find yourself in that situation, because you can't waste this window. Danielle Hunter's great right now.
Yeah.
But you know what happens with aging superstars like that? When they take a step back, it is really, really dramatic, right? Now, he's not there yet, but you've got to take advantage of that guy right now and how great he is. You've got to take advantage of what Stephon Diggs and hopefully a healthy Adam Thielen gives you, a Kyle Rudolph, Herb Smith. You got to take advantage of this now, because even a year later, even 2021, it could be a whole different story, Manny. This team could be completely out of the mix in the NFC, and that's why I feel like they got to capitalize, and that's where the Kubiak promotion means to me, hey, look, there's a veteran guy that you can turn to if you feel like things are going completely south.
And I think it brings me to my next question, though, of how open is this window right now?
What?
Because here's the thing. I think San Francisco has been terrific, and John Lynch has done a great job.
Yeah, they're scary.
But I also think a part of this, too, is the 49ers were presented an opportunity, and they went 13-3, and they won some key road games down the stretch. New Orleans, Seattle to win the division in week 17, got home field advantage. Now they're in the Super Bowl. You credit John Lynch for the great job he's done building the team and Kyle Shanahan coaching the team. But I also look back at the Vikings in 2017 when they had the number 1 defense statistically across the board in the NFL, and I wonder if that was their window with this group. And they went to Philadelphia in the NFC title game and laid an egg. And I wonder, and I look back at these last handful of years, and I wonder if 2017 was their shot. The 49ers have their shot now.
Yeah.
And they took advantage of it. They're in the Super Bowl. Now, I think on paper, it looks like the 49ers could be good over the next couple of years, but what if they're 10-6 next year? Because they have some injuries and the schedule.
The LA Rams.
The schedule. Yeah, the Rams. The Rams gave Jared Goff a long-term contract, and they re-upped on Todd Gurley, and they went 9-7 this year and missed the playoffs. Made a big trade for Jalen Ramsey to try and salvage their season. Gave up 2 first-round picks for him. Now they don't have any picks over the next couple of years.
Sitting at home. The good news is the people of LA didn't notice because they don't care about football in that town, but they'll continue.
So I just wonder, too, with the Vikings, if you look back at this Mike Zimmer era now, 6 years into this now, if their window of opportunity was 2017 and they just didn't cash in on it, and now it's time to sort of hit, maybe not exactly tear the entire thing down, but to start thinking about turning a page into a new era. Now, I think it's well up for debate if Mike Zimmer should be at the forefront of that. I
Yeah.
understand. I understand both sides of it, but I just wonder if the window has already kind of closed on this particular group, this core of players, and that if there's just going to be enough for them to get over the hump the next couple of years.
Well, if they were an AFC team, I would say, yeah, it's probably over.
Mhm.
Because in the AFC, think about being a younger AFC team. Like, let's say you're the Texans, right?
Mhm.
Or you're a team like the Jags a couple years ago when they go to the AFC Championship game, and everyone assumed they were a piece away, and now they're terrible, and they're going to break up, and they're not going to have anything left next season. If you're in the AFC and you were a younger team and you had a window, you had a game like the Jags, or you were the Colts under Andrew Luck, you'd be going, okay, I got to get through Tom Brady and however long he's going to play.
Yeah.
And now there's this dude, Patrick Mahomes, who could do this for another 15 years. Oh, and by the way, if he doesn't do it, it will be because this guy, Lamar Jackson, who could change the entire NFL, is right there. I mean, if you're an AFC team right now, you got to be going, my goodness, are we ever going to get to the Super Bowl if we don't have Mahomes?
With those two guys, we could be looking at Brady Manning part 2.
100%.
With those two guys, where they're just facing off every year in the playoffs, and
so
the
winner
winner of that is going to the Super Bowl. Yeah.
You're stuck in the AFC. I mean, because you're not getting through Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. I mean, the Titans came close, but you're not getting through both of those guys going forward. In the NFC, Manny, who scares you? Who's great? The 49ers are very scary right now. We don't know if they can do this consistently. No one looks scarier than the Rams a year ago. The Rams looked like the kind of team that was going to score 40 points a game.
Yeah.
Defensively, they were good. They were going to change the NFL with the style they were playing and Sean McVay. And they were going to be the antidote, the kryptonite to Tom Brady and the Patriots. Where are they at this year?
They're 9-7 with no draft picks.
Sitting at home. No draft picks, trying to figure out where they go. Yeah. So the NFC, in my opinion, doesn't have that juggernaut. There's no Thanos in the NFC, which is why I say the window is still open. Green Bay was not a great team, but they were good enough in the NFC to get a game at home and to play Seattle there. The Seattle Seahawks, I think, were a very overrated team, but they have one of the best quarterbacks in football in Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was a good team. The Eagles made the playoffs, America. The Eagles, right? And all the struggles they had, they stumbled into a playoff spot. So I think this, in terms of the NFC, there is a path to getting there if you're the Minnesota Vikings. I don't know anything about winning it. And erase all of this if the 49ers beat the Chiefs by 2 touchdowns and they re-up in the offseason and continue to get better, we can have a different conversation. But, Manny, right now, it feels like the Vikings can be at that level and at a minimum put themselves in a position to be a game away from the Super Bowl. And if they don't do that, why aren't you moving on from this? Like, that has to be the expectation. We cannot keep changing expectations based on the fact that they're not meeting the mark. Like, you don't get to lower the bar because you're struggling, because you can't beat Kansas City and Matt Moore, because you can't beat Chase Daniel and Chicago Bears. That ain't going to change nothing in terms of expectations. You told people in 2017 that you needed a quarterback. You went out and got your quarterback, and his name was Kirk Cousins. Yeah. You got him, and where have you been since? You said you needed a real quarterback. You got one, and here we are going, can they get back to the NFC Championship game? If they don't do that next year, Manny, you've got to help me understand why this team doesn't make dramatic changes.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think my question is, can they do it with this quarterback? And Myron, I'm not sure they can. I'm not sure they can, because there is still a lot of talent on this team. And here we are again, a year later, with Kirk Cousins talking about they need to get this, they need to get this, and they need to get this, and they need to get this.
Yeah.
And they need to get this over on defense, and they need to improve this. And even if they decide to part ways with, let's say, Everson Griffin, and, you part ways with Everson Griffin, okay, you got to find somebody else to step in to that spot. You part ways with Xavier Rhodes. Okay, that's going to give you some cap relief.
Yep.
You gotta fill that spot.
You do.
Is Mike Hughes going to fill that spot?
Let's put a cardboard box there. I mean, that doesn't move any faster than that.
Yeah.
So. Let's put a cardboard box in the ground.
But the reality is you're cutting Xavier Rhodes because you need to improve at that position.
Yeah.
And can you improve at that position? Can you go into free agency and do that? Okay. That's one of the things you need to do. All right. Offensive line. We hear about the offensive line a lot with Kirk Cousins. Okay. If you're going to move on from Riley Reif, you're going to draft a left tackle. Okay. Is he going to be Jonathan Ogden right away? Because it seems like that's what he's going to need to be.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That's a lot to ask. Okay. Pat Elflein had a really bad year by PFF numbers and everything, and everybody wants to get rid of Pat Elflein. Okay. I'm not against that. You got to find his replacement. You got to upgrade at that position.
You do.
Okay. It just, to me, it's like, is improving this team enough to get them over the hump? Is it even feasible? Is it even possible? And I'm not sure if there is enough cap space and enough draft capital to put this team in a position to where they can get to the Super Bowl next season.
Let me ask you this question. What conversation are we having right now if the Minnesota Vikings host the Seattle Seahawks in the divisional round of the playoffs, win, and advance to the NFC Championship game? And let's say they don't show up against the 49ers, not because they're not a good team, but because the 49ers are just that good. What conversation are we having right now about windows? It's different, right? It's different. So for me, if I thought that this team had no path to that point, I could go, okay, I get it. There are clearly 3 or 4 teams in the NFC that are significantly better than the Minnesota Vikings, and there's just no way. But it feels like a numbers game to me.
Yeah.
And they just keep losing the numbers game. And I understand that is about showing up in big moments, and that's something that they've got to do
that's
with
on
Kirk
the head
Cousins.
coach, and it's on the quarterback.
100%.
Yep.
That's the biggest change they got to make between now and next